And good morning, and welcome to Backchannel. It's 9 o'clock on the nose, and it's also Tuesday morning, March 29, and I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show. Lots to talk about this morning. We're going to whiz our way through some of the news, the newspapers, and just see what's happening across this incredible country. So wherever you are and whoever you are, you're very welcome to join us, join in, be part of the show. You can message, of course, in the usual way. You've probably got that down pat by now. You've probably kind of done it many times. If you have an Echo show, wake it up, say the word say, and then your message. If you don't have an Echo show and you want to listen on your regular Echo speaker, then you could go to backchannel.tv on your browser. That's backchannel.tv. And just message from there in the old-fashioned way, using your fingers. And if you don't have either of those and you want to follow the show, watch the show, and be part of the show, then YouTube is a good fail-safe because you can comment there as well. Okay, I'm in LA, and Sarah's producing the show from Brooklyn, and we are here for you, whatever you need, whatever you fancy, whatever you desire. Some of the stories we're going to be looking at this morning, some interesting things on the go. Jared Kushner being connected to the January 6th insurrection. That's something that's happening. Ron DeSantis signed the Don't Say Gay bill yesterday in front of a whole bunch of children, 10% of which are most likely to be gay. Also, the Venezuelan troops. We'll be looking at the issues there with Colombia and human rights, and also the 7-hour gap in the phone call log that Donald Trump was supposed to, or the White House records submitted to the January 6th committee. So we'll look at that and all of those stories together in some detail. First, though, we're going to jump on the morning newspapers. Oh, hello. Who's here? Quit is here, and Stacey is here, and Thriving ASP is here. So great to know you're already joining in with the program. We're going to jump into the LA Times, seeing as I'm in Los Angeles. We might as well, and see what the big stories are making the headlines this morning. Russia says it will reduce attacks as talks with Ukraine resume. Yes, Moscow said it will scale back its offensive around the Ukrainian cities of Kiev and Chernihiv, I should say, as part of to give more impetus to peace talks. I don't believe that. I just don't believe it. Not even for a second. You hear Russia making these bold claims and suggestions, but they didn't even allow humanitarian corridors. That they really are just completely planning to annihilate Ukraine. So I don't really trust what Russia have to offer. And now there's other countries that might be coming in to support Russia. I don't know. I think this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. So that's basically the main headline on the front of the LA Times today. The statement by Russian defense officials that they would curb assaults around Kiev and the hard-hit city of Chernihiv came as Ukrainian troops continued to mount stiff resistance in those areas. Russian forces have been bogged down outside the capital for weeks, unable to break through into the heart of the city, in a sign that a reduction in attacks might already have begun. No new missile attacks were reported overnight in Kiev, but regional officials reported shelling elsewhere on Tuesday, including an attack that partially destroyed a government building in the southeastern port city of Mykolaiv and an oil depot hit by a missile in Ravine in the northwest. So, yeah, I mean, look, they're still assaulting at quite a rate, A sad and scary time for LGBTQ students and their families. This is with the midterm elections looming. GOP leaders are stoking homophobic and anti-transgender sentiments as a way to help the party seize control of Congress in November. I don't think that's going to work. I don't see how being anti-gay is going to allow them to seize Congress. I really don't. I don't think people are as narrow-minded as they are. They just become obsessed with their base. I don't think the general populace really is anything close to that. Also, the great SoCal house hunt. Buying a home for the first time is one of life's sweet milestones. In Southern California, it's not for the faint of heart. So there's a whole story about house buying on the front of the LA Times. A story about Biden's gaffes should not drive US policies on Russia. Yeah, I mean, the problem with Biden is that he is very old and he just kind of says stuff sometimes, I mean, not as bad as Trump did, but He just comes out with stuff sometimes. It's interesting. Stacey says, Anthony, get ready because it's time for you and me to spend our time together. Well, okay. I will do my best. Okay, back into some more newspapers. Decatur Daily next. This is for the Tennessee Valley. They lead with Biden says remark on Putin's power was about moral outrage. Yes, I mean, so here it is again, the same story, that he was morally outraged, but says Putin shouldn't be in power. Well, the problem is, if the president says Putin shouldn't be in power, to some, that would suggest that the president was seeking regime change, which, of course, he claims he is not. Trump likely committed crimes related to election on the front of the Decatur Daily, and Decatur and Austin high schools only open to juniors on Tuesday, apparently. So, there we go. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Anything else? Anything else happening here? Not really. I mean, it's a cute little newspaper, but not really. I do like these local newspapers. No, it's just stories about local traffic, And I think we're beyond that. Let's go to the Tallahassee Democrat now. Bounce to altitude trampoline park. Oh, I do love a trampoline park, don't you? I think that's a new one opening there. And what else? A legal battle over gambling in North Florida continues. 30 strong. The 2022 class of 25 women, 5 young women. DeSantis signs into law restrictions on sexual orientation discussion. I mean, that's obviously one of the big stories. We're going to take a look at that in just a moment. I just was very saddened yesterday when they published that photograph of DeSantis signing away this, the Don't Say Gay bill, as it's being called. And he was just surrounded by kids, and they're like, yeah. And it's just so depressing because you're basically indoctrinating these young children into thinking that it's okay to discriminate against other people. Before they're even old enough to think for themselves. So the indoctrination that he's seeking to protect is actually more present than you would have thought if he hadn't have signed the bill at all. Crazy. We could look at that story now, actually. I kind of think that's worthy of a little look if you're interested. Let's have a look here. As reported, it says Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Monday signed legislation banning certain instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity in the classroom, approving the controversial measure that opponents have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. HB 1557, titled the Parental Rights in Education Bill, was given final passage by Florida's GOP-controlled legislature earlier this month. The law is set to take effect in July. The legislation set off a social and political firestorm in Florida when it was introduced by Republican lawmakers in January. Its passage comes as conservatives around the country are pushing a host of bills that would further marginalize members of the LGBTQ+ community. DeSantis, a staunch conservative with a history of supporting anti-LGBTQ causes, previously approved legislation targeting LGBTQ Floridians, including an anti-trans sport ban last year. We will continue to recognize that in the state of Florida, parents have a fundamental role in the education, healthcare, and well-being of their children. We will not move from that, said DeSantis during Monday's bill signing. The move was met with immediate backlash from advocates, including the Trevor Project, a non-profit organization that works on suicide prevention amongst LGBTQ+ youth. So, I mean, the thing that I think about this, I do think a lot about it. And Sarah, you're welcome to pop in, because of course I'm sure you'll have opinions about this. But I really feel like to be so overtly and outwardly homophobic is becoming so normalized in conservative states that what will eventually happen is that people will start to move, migrate out of states where they might be living that have anti-gay views. And you'll end up with this kind of segregationist society once again. Good morning. So you'll basically you'll choose to live somewhere where you'll feel welcomed and safe. And so eventually there'll just be like there'll be there'll be no homos in Florida. Put it that way.
That might be the case, but also like it depends on where people's jobs are.
Your sound is weird, Sarah. We can't really hear you. It sounds like you're underwater.
You hear me now?
No.
No? Okay. Hold on.
Okay, you come right back in just a moment. Yeah, I mean that's my fear is that we are going to be surrounded by states that are just, the prejudice will be worn on the outside. So you'll end up with states where people just won't feel safe, and they just won't live there. And then there'll be this mass migration where only conservatives will live in conservative states, and only Democrats will live in Democrat states. And that'll mean that if you want to go to Disneyland, for example, you'll have to go to the one in California if you were LGBTQ+, rather than the one in Orlando. Do you see what I mean? It's like, that's my fear, is that the segregation will be no different to the kind of the segregation of the 1940s and 50s. Are you back with a wired device? Oh, now I can't hear you at all. Now it's pure silence. Oh, sound, input, select. Here we go. This is going to work. I can feel it.
Now?
Yes, there you are.
Great. Amazing.
Loud and clear.
So, having grown up on the East Coast, obviously it's been a little more progressive, but, the people who live in these states, like Florida, where these bills are being passed, they don't really always have the means to move. And I don't think that's the solution, is to move out of these states. I think because that's not going to make anything better. That's not going to do anything. Then you're
I'm not suggesting they should. I'm saying I fear that that's what will end up happening.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think my hope is that people focus on making the places that they're already living a better place. I think that, with elections, that can change things, and I know grassroots organizations are trying to help change things, so that's my hope. But honestly, after the pandemic, not a whole lot of people are really moving, and housing prices are astronomical right now. You will pay 50 to 100 over asking at the minimum right now for any house. So again, unless you are very well off and very wealthy, it's going to be really hard to move. So, I mean, obviously, like, living here in New York City, it's a little more progressive. Sorry, I'm trying to block the light from the window. But you know what I mean? I don't know if I really see that happening for a lot of people to just like move. I don't think
because it's happening
really...
the other way around. There's a lot of conservatives moving from
California,
moving to Florida. And so what I suggested, because California and Florida are kind of equivalent, climate states, similar. And so if you want the beach and all that kind of stuff. So I know a lot of people who have moved in that direction. But I also I know two people personally who have moved from Florida to California because of the well, it was actually mainly because of just the conservatism, it wasn't to do with gay rights necessarily, but it was to do with the pandemic and mask wearing and all that kind of stuff. So I do think that it is going to cause migration, but I just worry that what will be the result of that, long term. The result of that will be, and I was saying when you disappeared from him, and I said if you want to go to Disneyland, if you're gay, you'll end up going to the California Disneyland. And if you're conservative, you'll end up going to the Orlando one.
I don't necessarily think that's true. I mean, because again, not everyone has the means to do that.
Sure.
That's a privilege to be like a lot going to like in other countries right now. If you're not everyone has the means to just leave. In Ukraine right now, some people are stuck there because they cannot escape. And I think it's very privileged of us to be able to say, oh, we can just leave if something like that happens, when it's really not always the case. I mean, a lot of people are still struggling right now just to make ends meet in their own homes. And I think, my wish is that doesn't happen and people there can help make it better. I don't think that, if conservatives really want to leave to go to a more conservative state, I don't really see the logic in that. I don't really see how that helps them in any way, because those kind of things can change. But I just think
a lot of it's to do with tax. A
of
lot of people
course,
leaving California because the tax is so high, and of course Republicans are so desperate not to pay tax. But my concern is that a lot of these bills that DeSantis is signing, they're not being done with any research or referendum. To see how many people in the state actually want it. I think he's just doing it because he's surrounded in a bubble by some very extreme right-wing people. And then they're going to find, once they do go to the polls, that actually people didn't want abortion to be banned. They didn't want the Don't Say Gay bill. I actually think he's he's living in his own privilege,
Well, and he also wants to run for president. That's the other thing. He's doing this because I think he sees what's happening with Trump right now.
Yeah.
And how he's sort of losing a little bit of his base.
Yeah.
Some stuff is coming to light. I don't know if anything will come of it. I don't know if he'll actually be indicted. But I think he's kind of seeing like, okay, he's kind of like the second Trump in a way. So I think he's just doing that because he's trying to appeal to Trump's base. But again, like it's all obviously disguised as bigotry and hate and homophobia that they're doing these things. And I really feel for the people of Florida. I feel for the kids because that's just not okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I can't imagine, if you're somebody who's lived in a place your entire life, whether that be Texas or anywhere else in the world, and the government, or I guess I'll just say Texas, I won't compare it to other places in the world, but like Texas or Florida, where you've lived your whole life, your family's there, your friends are there, your job is there, and when governors are signing these bills, you can't just pick up and leave. That's your whole life is there. So again, it's very privileged for us to say, oh, well, everyone's going to leave, because I honestly don't think that's going to happen. I don't think everyone really has the means to do that. I think, honestly, a lot of people have left New York, which is a very progressive state, because of the pandemic, really. Because, people want land, people want
it wasn't
space.
A great place to be during a lockdown. For sure.
Yeah, of course. But, I hope, my hope for the next election is that these people who are creating these laws are no longer in power and that we can change them.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that will actually happen. And again, not everyone can just pick up and leave. And we're kind of seeing that, especially in Texas with all these trans bills.
Yes.
Texas is a huge state. Texas is ginormous, and not everyone can just drive across Texas and leave. So that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was just being hypothetical about where we're going to end up, because this does happen. It's already happened in some ways. There are certain parts of states that are segregated in groups, and in fact, here in California, you only have to go to Orange County for it to be a very right-leaning area.
Yeah, and even Stacey is saying she can't leave the house without help. So it's like...
Yeah, exactly. That's the reality for a lot of people. The backlash off the Will Smith thing today is interesting. I might make a little wager with you if you're interested. I don't know if you're a betting person.
Okay, it depends on the wager.
Well, the wager is no money, just like, ha, told you so. Like, we'll just say that. That I think the Academy might rescind his Best Actor Oscar.
That's awful.
That's my feeling.
That's horrible.
Yeah, that's my feeling.
That's horrible. Well, then are we going to take away all of Harvey Weinstein's Oscars too?
Well, they did kick Harvey Weinstein out of the Academy.
Yeah, but that's
Big
nothing.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah, take away Harvey Weinstein's Oscars and then we can talk. Take away
Good
all
point.
of Roman Polanski's Oscars and then, we can talk. Like,
yeah.
Hattie McDaniel was like the first Black person to win an Oscar, and they made her sit in the very, very back. Yeah. And people are like, this is the ugliest Oscars I've ever seen. Well, I think that was ugly. I think Seth MacFarlane singing I Saw Your Boobs in 2013 was disgusting and vile and one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. So I think the Academy should check itself on its racism blatantly. And if it takes away Will Smith's Oscars, then they will be supporting rapists and other racist people. And I honestly really haven't watched the Oscars since forever. I find award shows irrelevant and not a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a good reflection of what's really popular and a good reflection of society today. Yeah. So, and it's very like, not oligarchy, but like aristocracy, proletariat, like elitist.
Yeah.
So, if they do that, I hope they, Casey Affleck assaulted Brie Larson. Are they going to take away his Oscar too? Like, I'm waiting. You know what I mean? Like, and we just talked about this on Get On Up. I'd love to hear what the Academy has to say about all of that.
They certainly would have a lot of backtracking to do, wouldn't they?
Oh, 100. But they know they won't, because that organization is very racist. And again, it's really, really unfortunate because, as we were saying yesterday, it was such an historical night, especially for people of color and queer people. Yeah. And all that's getting
and deaf people as well.
And deaf people. Yeah. And it's getting kind of overshadowed by the fact that Will Smith got angry because somebody made a horrible joke about his wife. You know what I mean? Like, it's all very... So that's just what I think. If they want to do that, then I'm going to
It'll be an interesting kind of perspective on the, where the Academy is at. And you're right. I mean, the Academy is criticized because it's, full of old white men, invariably, and they just aren't as progressive or thoughtful as they could be. But this will be very symbolic. Their decision in this would be very symbolic. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing to watch here.
I don't know if I'd call it symbolic. I'd probably call it like just blatant racism if they did that. If they just took away his first, he's been waiting so long.
Oh, I know. It's just the irony, I guess, of him slapping somebody and then winning the Oscar like 10 minutes later.
Yeah, but what if he was white? I just want everyone to think, what if this was two white guys? Or what if it was, a white guy who slapped Chris Rock? You know what I mean? I think it's all very, it just really shows we've come far, but we're still dealing with the same BS that we've kind of been dealing with forever. And institutions like the Academy, what makes them so important that they get to decide what the best films are? You know what I mean? Just little things like that.
Especially when there's a very democratic way to vote for things these days using smartphones. If they really wanted to make it the people's choice, they could easily just have an app and everybody signs up and votes, and then it's done. And you're right.
Absolutely, yeah.
They could do that with voting in elections as well. There's all sorts of things you can do using technology to advance.
I hope they don't. I hope they don't do that. I know they're looking further into it, but it's just a very telling of how a lot of white people are reacting versus how other people are reacting to this. And I encourage people, and I implore everyone to just read up on your history a little bit about past Oscars. And when Marlon Brando won in the 70s, or was it the 80s, when the indigenous woman Littlefeather accepted for him, and then she was almost assaulted by Wayne Brady. Not Wayne Brady. what was his name? Jane Fonda's ex-husband. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. I just encourage everybody to really look at the history of the Oscars before we say this was a really ugly thing. And
Mel Gibson's done a couple of things in his time as well, hasn't he? You know, and
exactly.
he was photographed like watching this, like this, and you know, he's had some anti-Semitic controversy surrounding him as well.
100%. And you know, so again, just look at the history of like what the Oscars really are and like what they've really done and how, you know, it's we still have a long way to go with all award shows, really. I mean, it's so I mean, I wouldn't have done what Will Smith did. I don't condone any violence, obviously, but I'm not going to say that was the ugliest thing I've ever seen at the Oscars.
And a lot of commentators have said that, you know, he had a fist, but he chose not to use it. He chose to use a slap of a hand. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, that does show restraint in some way.
Exactly. It does. And, but, you know, Chris Rock shouldn't have said those things.
No. And the fact that he's not pressing charges suggests also that he realized that he was probably in the wrong. I thought it was very interesting watching Chris Rock trying to like gather himself after that happened and to see how he completely lost track of all of his words and was really, you know, just completely thrown, and it showed a kind of level of vulnerability that was just, you know, it was just very interesting, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but it's just like very telling of how Hollywood still isn't as progressive as we think. There's still a lot of underlying issues that not everybody really talks about or cares to think about.
Yes.
And I just wish everybody would do that. And if you want to know more, I'd be happy to talk to any of you about this. You can watch Get On Up, and we talk all about this type of stuff.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you, as always. I'm going to talk about the January 6th committee now, because I think that's just something that is it's getting... I personally am like... I'm like running out of fingernails now. I'm literally biting all of them off, just desperate for them to get to that moment where they can, you know, they can indict the former president. And it's like, how much evidence does one need against a man before he becomes, you know, potentially, you know, up for an arrest? But, you know, the dream of seeing him like in handcuffs or in an orange jumpsuit or like, you know, with his hair all like hanging down his face being photographed.
Or off, just the toupee
off. Just take it off, yeah. But the idea of seeing him like in a kind of photo, you know, one of those, he's like being charged, wearing an orange jumpsuit. I mean, there are some kind of deep fake pictures of that, you know, floating around.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
And it's just a lovely image to see, you know, because the guy spent his whole life in the criminal world and just getting away with it in plain sight.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, everyone gets their comeuppance. Every dog has its day, and maybe his day has finally come.
I really hope so. The stuff with Peter Navarro today has been very interesting. I don't know if you've seen that. Peter Navarro, the former Trump aide, who basically has gone on TV and spilt the beans about the whole insurrection, you know, just explained what they'd planned and how they'd planned it and how Trump was involved. And then they're now starting to use it as evidence. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll let you talk about that.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. See you later. Sarah there in Brooklyn. I'm Anthony in Los Angeles. This is Backchannel as we continue the conversation. Let's just check in on some of your messages. Thank you very much for sending these. Doug has joined us. Anthony says, I don't think you should bite your fingernails. It's not a good thing to do. Loving dear, affectionate Carp is with us as well. Stacey says, the music is making me want to dance in my chair. Well, that's kind of the whole idea, you know. You can have a little dance while we talk. Cloudy Ant is here, Concerned Hummingbird, and April, first time on the show from April in Florida. So welcome. What's it like being in Florida? under the rule of Ron DeSantis? Is it something that you are accepting of, or is it something that terrifies you? Maybe you can let me know in the usual way. You can go to backchannel.tv and message me from there. Let's take a look at some more of your messages here. Let's have a little jump in and see. Oh, I did actually want to talk. Let's just, while we can, let's just jump into this story about this Donald Trump 7-hour gap in the phone calls, and then we'll talk about Peter Navarro. This is internal White House records from the day of the attack on the U.S. Capitol that were turned over to the House Select Committee, show a gap in President Donald Trump's phone logs of 7 hours and 37 minutes, including the period where the building was being violently assaulted. According to documents obtained by CBS News, Robert Costa and the Washington Post's associate editor Bob Woodward, the lack of an official White House notation of any calls placed to or by Trump for 457 minutes, from 11:17 a.m. to 6:54 p.m. on the 6th of January, means there is no record of the calls made by Trump as his supporters descended on the U.S. Capitol, battered overwhelmed police, and forcibly entered the building, prompting lawmakers and Vice President Mike Pence to flee for safety. The 11 pages of records, which consist of the president's official daily diary and White House switchboard call log, were turned over by the National Archives earlier this year to the House Select Committee investigating the attack. The records show that Trump was active on the phone for part of the day, documenting conversations that he had with at least 8 people in the morning and 11 people that evening. The gap also stands in stark contrast to the extensive public reporting about phone conversations he had with allies during the attack. Well, the House panel is now investigating whether Trump communicated that day through backchannels, ironically. Phones of aides or personal disposable phones known as burner phones, according to 2 people with knowledge of the probe, who, like others interviewed for this report, spoke on the condition of anonymity. The committee is also scrutinizing whether it received the full log from that day. Well, the records show that former White House Chief Strategist Stephen Bannon, who said on his podcast on the 5th of January that all hell is going to break loose tomorrow, spoke with Trump twice on the 6th of January. In a statement last night, Trump said, "I have no idea what a burner phone is. To the best of my knowledge, I've never even heard the term." I mean, this is what he does. Deny, deny, deny. I've never met Stormy Daniels. I don't know who she is. Oh, yeah, well, we paid her off. I mean, this is how the guy works, you know. A spokesperson said Trump had nothing to do with the records and had assumed any and all of his phone calls were recorded and preserved. So there it is. But that really is the story that it kind of is connected in many ways to, you know, this other news about, there's a story about Jared Kushner. He's expected to appear before the committee this week. The son-in-law, of course, and former senior advisor to Trump, is expected to appear before the House Select Committee. He is going to appear voluntarily, and the meeting will likely be virtual. A committee spokesperson declined to comment on Kushner's expected appearance. Apparently last month, Ivanka, Trump's daughter/wife, who is married to Kushner and also served as a senior White House advisor, was in discussions with the House Select Committee to voluntarily appear for an interview, her spokesperson and 2 sources familiar with the probe confirmed. The meeting comes at a significant moment for the committee, where its investigation is making progress on multiple fronts. The panel is also seeking an interview with Ginny Thomas, the conservative activist and wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, following revelations that she texted with former Trump White House aide Mark Meadows in an effort to overturn the election. I mean, there is calls now for Clarence Thomas to resign his place on the Supreme Court because of, you know, a conflict of interest with his wife. I doubt very much that would happen. Also yesterday, a federal judge said Trump might, and right-wing attorney John Eastman, may have been planning a crime as they sought to disrupt the congressional certification of the election. The judge in California ordered Eastman to turn over 101 emails from around January 6th that he's tried to keep secret from the House Select Committee investigating the U.S. Capitol attack. So, you know, there's a lot of potential backlash here, and a lot of these stories are kind of coming together, you know, and I really fear that the time that it's taking suggests to me that, yes, they're being very thorough, but it also worries me because I feel like Merrick Garland, who is the Attorney General, he is somebody who kind of keeps saying over and over that he will investigate anything that is put in front of him, But maybe he's just waiting for this to be put in front of him. People are saying that the Justice Department could be more proactive. And yet I recognize that it's probably, they want to follow all of the legal, the course of action that is the legal and proper. But for that to happen, they have to be recommended a prosecution by the January 6th committee, which hopefully they're going to do sooner rather than later, because that's my worry. It does seem like it's taking a long time. I mean, we're now, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 months since the insurrection. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? So, if you have a view on this, I'm keen to know. I feel like, are they taking too long? Should this have been sorted out by now? Or do you think if you're going after the former president and trying to prove that he has committed crimes, you need to be exceptionally thorough? C-Ron's joined us from Texas. Hello, hello. Stacey says, Alexa does his lay, lay, lay. Interesting. You could message via backchannel.tv if you'd like to go there and send us a message. That's backchannel.tv. You can also leave reviews there as well. Loads of people have been reviewing the various shows on Backchannel on Amazon, and that would be great to kind of get your reviews as well. So if you want to message, and if you look at backchannel.tv, there's an opportunity there to send your reviews in the usual way. Okay, let's go back to some more of these kind of top stories making the headlines this morning. A little check-in on Russia, because there's been some movement there. This is that they're now saying there'll be some de-escalation around Kiev, as Russia says the move is not a ceasefire. Interesting. I knew there would be something, It says the UK now sees some reduction in Russian bombardment around Kiev. The UK wants to see a full withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine and will judge tentative steps towards a possible peace deal by actions rather than words, said Boris Johnson's spokesperson. Asked if the Prime Minister was encouraged by Russia's promise to scale down military operations around Kiev and the northern Ukraine, Johnson's spokesperson said, "We will judge Putin and his regime by his actions, not by his words." He then said that there's been some reduction in Russian bombardment around Kiev, largely because Ukrainian forces have been successfully pushing back the Russian offensives in the northwest of the city. But fighting continues. There's heavy bombardment in Mariupol and other areas, so we don't want to see anything less than a complete withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory, is what they're saying. Yes, the negotiators are arriving. I think they arrived this morning early in the Istanbul's Dolmabahce Palace to conduct talks in a formal setting, shielded from a media scrum assembled at the entrance. The delegations conducted delicate negotiations, facing one another at a long conference table inside a stone-walled room, with pictures of the meeting showing Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich seated at a small nearby table alongside Turkish presidential spokesman Ibrahim Khan. The discussions followed a short opening speech by the Turkish president, Erdogan, who addressed them from a lectern, saying the world is waiting for good news, and good news from you. Well, an advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky tweeted, "Unconditional security guarantees for Ukraine, ceasefire, effective decisions on humanitarian corridors and humanitarian convoys, observance by the parties of the rules and customs of war, difficult negotiations for peace in our country. Istanbul round right now," with a picture that showed him embracing another member of one of the delegations. So, Zelensky's social media has been kind of amazing throughout all of this, hasn't it, if you think about it? This just giving people hope, supporting the Ukrainian people, pleading with foreign nations to support with weapons and tanks and, equipment. It's been ongoing. It's been relentless, you might argue. And I think that I actually feel like if Russia does withdraw or reduce the shelling in Kiev, that might certainly protect Volodymyr Zelensky, the president, who I really don't want him to lose his life over this. I want him to kind of see this through. Anyway, there is a theory now that meeting that Roman Abramovich was present at could have been more than it seemed. They're now saying there's a chance that the delegation could have been poisoned by the Russians. And the Turkish foreign minister said, "We see with satisfaction that both sides are getting closer at every stage. We expressed hopes the foreign ministers and later perhaps even Zelensky and Putin would meet." Ukrainian and Turkish diplomats later said the Istanbul talks were not scheduled to continue into a second day. Yet after the initial formal meeting, discussions between both Ukrainian and Russian representatives continued apace at the glitzy Shangri-La Hotel adjacent to the Dolmbalash Palace. And Podolyak resisted further questions from journalists and disappeared from view under the crystal chandeliers in the hotel lobby. But out on the sunlit terrace at the Shangri-La Seafood and Burger Restaurant, Abramovich sat and talked intently with Ukrainian Prime Minister Rustem Umerov, with whom he reportedly previously held a series of talks in Istanbul under Kalin's supervision. And apparently Umerov and Abramovich reportedly suffered symptoms consistent with poisoning during their previous series of unofficial talks. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba told Ukraine's channel prior to the meetings, "I advise anyone going through negotiations with the Russian Federation not to eat or drink anything, and preferably avoid touching any surface." Well, the restaurant's long terrace overlooks Bosphorus and the adjacent bustling Besiktas ferry stop, with travellers hurrying past, seemingly unaware of their proximity to the group of their furtive negotiators. I mean, just the idea that the Russians would poison people during negotiations. I mean, that is really an example of quite how insane and how murderous Russia is really as a state. Of course, if you look at their history of poisoning people, it goes back an awfully long way, including that case of Alexander Litvinenko, who was a whistleblower, and he got poisoned, and he died tragically. He got poisoned in a sushi restaurant in London. Not by the sushi, but that's where he was poisoned. Okay, let's jump onto some more of these stories here. Oh, lots of messages. Thank you very much for these. Nice to know that you're in touch and spending your chat time with us. Interesting Tiger just joined in. Stacey says Aunt Tracy is looking after me once again. Frank is here. Alfred as well. Thank you. Welcome. Send your messages to backchannel.tv to have me see them and read them aloud. Okay, let's continue with this look at some of these latest news on Russia and Kiev. A Russian airstrike hit a government building in the southern Ukrainian port city of Mykolaiv on Tuesday, destroying a large portion of the structure and leaving people trapped under debris. At least 7 people were killed and 22 injured, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Danish parliament in a video address. Russia said it will significantly cut back its military activity in northern Ukraine after meaningful progress at peace talks in Istanbul, in a potentially significant shift more than a month after the start of the invasion. Russia's Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fromin said that Moscow would radically reduce military activity in the direction of Kiev and Chernihiv. However, Moscow's lead negotiator in talks with Ukraine, Vladimir Medinsky, said Russia's promise to drastically reduce military operations does not represent a ceasefire. In an interview with the Russian state-owner TASS news agency, Medinsky said there is still a long way to go to reach a mutual agreement with Ukraine. Well, isn't that the problem, though? And this is what I've been saying all along, is that we really hear a lot from Russia, and we don't see a lot other than shelling and shooting and murdering and potentially poisoning. And that's what they're good at. Russia doesn't do ceasefires. I mean, sometimes it walks away, with its tail between its legs. But as they did in Afghanistan all those years ago, you may remember. Or you may not remember. But that's my concern anyway. I really feel like we are dealing with a kind of unknown quantity in Russia. They're just not the type of country to be trusted and to negotiate with. In fact, I would argue that all of these negotiations that are going on are fake. They're just designed to prolong the war. And I just can't see how Russia can win, but I also can't see how they can negotiate either. And they're certainly not going to ceasefire. They're just not. Okay, let's have a look at some more of this. Thank you very much for these wonderful messages and all of your excellent stuff. The San Antonio Express News for today They lead with, they're trying to advertise selling me 6 weeks for 99 cents. No, I'm good, thanks. Jim's Restaurants feud, just latest in long line of San Antonio business disputes to split a family. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I wonder if that's to do with politics or something else. You know, it's often the case, isn't it, that families get split apart. Doesn't say. Well, it certainly doesn't say there. Let me see. Doesn't say. We'll just have to guess. I think this is a fight over who owns the original Jim's Restaurant. It's like a family feud. Texas Rangers fumbled and dropped the ball in sex trafficking case as well. This story is court-appointed monitors of Texas's foster care system say the state rushed its investigation into the Refuge, a Bastrop facility where employees were accused of sex trafficking foster kids, and produced an exonerating report that was at best premature. The monitors found ample evidence of abuse, neglect and exploitation at the state-contracted center, which was established to care for survivors of sex trafficking. The accusations of misconduct at the facility surfaced in court documents earlier this month as state officials detailed multiple reports of abuse and a January incident in which a former employee allegedly stole nude photos of 2 residents in exchange for drugs. So there we go. That's how Texas is enjoying its, foster care homes. Seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? What else as well here? They're saying Will Smith would be charged if it occurred here. This is regarding Texas versus California. Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez said the actor Will Smith would have been charged with assault if he'd publicly slapped someone in Bexar County. Even if a complainant would have later indicted a willingness or desire to drop charges or to waive prosecution, there's enough probable cause to arrest and charge an individual like that, Gonzalez said, commenting on the televised moment at the Oscars late on Sunday as Smith struck comedian Chris Rock, who had delivered an edgy joke about Smith's wife. I wouldn't say it was edgy, and I probably wouldn't say it was a joke either, because if it's a joke, it has to be funny. It just wasn't very funny. It's very cheap. Really kind of not. Just wasn't a high standard joke. I think Chris Rock's better than that. A San Antonio gang member was convicted of multiple federal drug and firearms charges. Kenton Morris Haynes, 27-year-old, after a 4-day jury trial, was found guilty of 1 count of recent receipt of a firearm under indictment, 1 count of possession of a firearm in furtherance of drug trafficking crime, and 1 count of possession with intent to distribute. So there we are. That's how that one looks. This is the San Antonio Express News that I'm looking across for you now, trying to see if there's anything that takes my fancy that I can work with. This is the FDA. This is quite interesting. This is the FDA has okayed another booster. UK regulators on Tuesday authorised another COVID-19 booster for people aged 50 and older, a step to offer extra protection for the most vulnerable in case the coronavirus rebounds. The Food and Drug Administration's decision opens a 4th dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines to that age group at least 4 months after their previous booster. Wow, I mean, I'm not quite eligible for that age-wise, but I think I'd definitely try and go and get one anyway, I just like the idea of being fully immunized for something like this, and I've not had any reactions from the last booster, so I think another one would probably be a very good idea. Okay, let's jump on a couple more of these. Thank you. Oh, Lisa's here as well. Hello, Lisa. In Texas, and mint oyster and glossy barracuda in North Dakota. Welcome. Encouraging Links is here as well. Wanda has joined the show. And Mellow Leopards just popped in as well from Kentucky. So nice to know that you're part of the Backchannel family. This morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at, I'm in Los Angeles. It's 9:53 here. On the East Coast, it's 12:53, 7 minutes to 1. I'm Anthony. You have me till 2 o'clock this afternoon, and then you'll get your pal and my pal Hal doing his thing here on Backchannel. You can message me at backchannel.tv. Just go there, head to the web browser, wherever you have it, on your phone, on your laptop, or on your tablet. Type it in and then leave a message for me in the usual way. It would be great to chat to you there. And then it just pops up on my screen here, and then you and I can kind of talk about it, talk about stuff. We were going to talk about the Venezuelan troops. Do you remember this story? I mentioned it earlier on. This is the soldiers conducting joint operations with Colombian rebels in the state of Apure earlier this year, as violence increased along a remote and often lawless stretch of the Colombia-Venezuela border, according to a new report by Human Rights Watch. The report published on Monday said that in January a truce ended between the National Liberation Army and another rebel organization known as the Joint Eastern Command, leading to clashes, abductions and murders of civilians that forced more than 3,300 people to flee their homes in the Venezuelan state of Apure. In the Colombian province of Aruca, more than 3,800 people were displaced. Well, Human Rights Watch visited Aruca in February and spoke to humanitarian workers and refugees from Apure, who said they witnessed how members of Venezuela's National Guard entered villages with the ELN rebels and took people in trucks. Witnesses told Human Rights Watch that those who were snatched from their homes were accused of collaborating with the Joint Eastern Command. They said armed groups are committing brutal abuses against civilians in the Colombia-Venezuelan border area, in some cases with the complicity of Venezuelan security force members, while Colombian authorities haven't done enough to respond, said Tamara Broner, acting America's director at Human Rights Watch. In February, Colombia's defense minister said Venezuela's army had formed an alliance with the ELN to remove the Joint Eastern Command from the area because they were stealing drug routes from them. Venezuela's government denied accusations it was collaborating with the ELN and said it was fighting rebel groups from Colombia who were trying to destabilize the government. There it is. We're going to do a full US news update in just a few minutes' time, by the way. Sarah, if you could line that up, we'll do that at 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock your time, just to bring a little podcast of the day to you, a little podcast that I do. We'll do that in a few minutes' time. The Joint Eastern Command is led by former members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces in Colombia, who refused to sign a 2016 peace deal with the government in which more than 13,000 guerrilla fighters gave up their weapons. In March of last year, more than 5,000 people fled from Venezuela's Apure state into Colombia as fighting intensified between Venezuela's army and rebel groups. Venezuela's government said it's trying to remove all drug trafficking groups from Apure. Its report, Human Rights Watch, claimed that recent military operations in Apure have been directed solely against the Joint Eastern Command. So there we go. That's the Venezuelan troops operating alongside Colombian rebels. I mean, there's so much fighting going on everywhere now. And let's not forget that the fighting in Ukraine started 8 years ago with Russia. It didn't just start a few weeks ago. It was the separatists were already in place and they were funded by Russia and they were fighting the Ukrainians. It was like a proxy war. So there it is. Okay, let's do the US news update now. It's a little 2-minute podcast I do. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. And it's just a little update on what's happening in the news across the US. And you can,
It's Tuesday, March 29. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. US President Joe Biden on Monday submitted a $5.79 trillion budget plan to Congress that calls for record peacetime military spending and further aid for Ukraine, while raising taxes for billionaires and companies and lowering government deficits. The budget proposal for the fiscal year starting October 1st lays out Biden's priorities, including campaign promises to make the wealthy and companies pay more tax. It's merely a wish list as lawmakers on Capitol Hill make the final decisions on budget matters. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Congress looked forward to working on Biden's bold fiscal blueprint, even as some fellow Democrats chafed at Biden's pledge to boost military spending. Biden's plan drew immediate criticism from Republicans, who together with moderate Democrats killed similar tax proposals in the 2022 budget. A US judge ruled on Monday that former President Donald Trump more likely than not committed a felony by trying to pressure his vice president to obstruct Congress and overturn his election defeat on January 6. US District Judge David Carter in Los Angeles made the assertion in a written ruling that found the House of Representatives committee probing the attack on the US Capitol has a right to see emails written to Trump by one of his then lawyers, John Eastman. Carter said that Trump's alleged plan to overturn his election defeat to Democrat Joe Biden amounted to a coup. Carter's findings marked a breakthrough for the January 6 committee, which earlier this month said it believed Trump may have committed multiple felonies. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
And we're back. That was the US News Update. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, and if you like it, and if you want to download it, then, just go to iTunes. I think it's there, or it's pretty much everywhere, to be honest. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the 29th of March, 2022. This is Backchannel, and if you are joining us, then jump on the live chat at backchannel.tv, which is very easy to do. And Cynthia just did that. Stacey's back in with us as well. Maryland is here from New Hampshire. Cynthia's in Missouri. Hello. And Mellow Leopard has popped in, and Lisa has joined us. Stacey says thank you for the San Antonio Express news. Well, it's our pleasure. No problem at all. Glossy Barracuda and Mint, thank you very much for jumping in and encouraging links. Nice to know that you're all listening and enjoying the back channel on this Tuesday morning. Okay, let's jump back into some more of the stories making the headlines this morning, because this is what we do. We just take a look at how the news is developing. There's a kind of little update. Let's have a look. Is that the one I was thinking of? They've showing some images now. I've just come through some images of the aftermath of a Russian strike on a government building in the Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv. I was mentioning that earlier about what a situation that is, and it seems to have kind of got worse. But the devastation now. The thing that's so crazy is like, it's been completely devastated. I mean, the some of these cities have been completely devastated to the point that they are simply not. They're unrecognizable. They're uninhabitable. There is nowhere for people to go back and live. So you've got all these refugees that have now moved to Poland and neighboring countries. But they're not actually going to have a country to come back to. The bombardment, and this is a tactic that Russia has used before, the bombardment is just unprecedented. UK has said it's seeing some reduction in bombardment around Kiev. The US is saying that some troops are beginning to withdraw, which would be very interesting. This was dropped a couple of hours ago. They said they're observing a major strategy shift after Russia's defense ministry announced earlier that it would drastically reduce military activity outside Kiev. Russia's beginning to withdraw some forces, including Russian battalion tactical groups, leaving the surrounding areas around the Ukrainian capital. They're now pulling back in some areas of the north to focus on gains in the south and east. The officials warned that Russia could always reverse their latest move. Well, that's what I was saying earlier. They're just not really to be trusted, in my view. Because I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that. But people have been posting videos of Russian troops retreating from the direction of Kiev. Large numbers of BMDs with Russian and VDV flags were spotted on their way from the Ukrainian border to Belarus, where they were loaded onto railway platforms. So that really does sound like they are leaving, doesn't it? However, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, said he has not seen signs of real seriousness from Russia in pursuing peace, adding that Moscow should end the aggression now, stop firing, pull back its forces, and of course engage in talks. Speaking at a joint press conference with Morocco's foreign minister, Blinken said he'd not seen signs the talks between Ukraine and Russia are moving forward in an effective way. Ukraine's military said it had noted withdrawals from some forces around Kiev and Chernihiv. So there we go. That's the very latest on that one. Let's see what else is happening across the United States. Oh yes, Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation's been supported by almost half of Americans. This is a bit of a poll, They said that 47% want the US Senate to confirm her nomination, 26 are opposed, and the other 27 have no opinion. It's America personified. Unsurprisingly, Jackson is overwhelmingly backed by Democratic voters in the this is a Political Morning Consult poll. 75% of Democrats in favor of her. Amongst Republicans, only 21% are positive, and she earns the support of 39% of independents. The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote on her nomination next Monday with a full floor vote before Easter. Jackson endured an abrasive grilling from Republican senators last week who accused her of being soft on crime, and yet she is still on a glide path to confirmation, according to the Associated Press. Assuming all Democratic senators vote for her, and one possible holdout, Joe Manchin, of course, who's already signaled his support, she is expected to become the first black woman on the country's highest judicial panel. With all Democrats on board, just one Republican backing her would negate the need for Vice President Kamala Harris to cast a tie-breaking vote. The Utah Senator Mitt Romney said he hasn't reached a decision, while the moderate Maine Senator Susan Collins will talk to Jackson again this week before making up her mind. I mean, what decision is there to make? What the hell is Mitt Romney even thinking? Mitt Romney is a man who has shown, he's a former presidential candidate, the guy has shown that he has, respect for the Constitution and respect for, he voted against it, or you voted for Donald Trump's impeachment after he, conspired against the United States to overturn the election. And yet, how can he be uncertain about his decision here regarding Ketanji Brown Jackson? Just doesn't make sense to me. Meanwhile, another story that's just dropped is that Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of Florida, says he's filing a lawsuit against Joe Biden's administration for extending the federal mask mandate on public transportation. The action is going to further fuel speculation DeSantis is lining up a run to challenge Biden in the presidential election. He's the latest in a long line of anti-mask moves from the Donald Trump protege and heir apparent, denouncing the mandate as COVID theater, a phrase the governor has coined to belittle Biden's efforts to halt the spread of the pandemic. DeSantis announced the lawsuit at a press conference on Tuesday morning. I mean, let's not forget that DeSantis clearly had COVID and went missing for 3 weeks. There's a video of him making a speech at a semiconductors factory where the guy can barely get a word out because he's got no air in his lungs. And then he went supposedly on an unscheduled vacation. So, it's very clear to me that DeSantis is, he's not immune to coronavirus himself. For some reason, he just wants to kill a lot of people in his state. He said it's not something that's grounded in any science, DeSantis said of the mandate without citing evidence and pointing out that somebody on an aeroplane can be nibbling on peanuts for 2.5 hours with their mask down. It's created a lot of unruly passenger situations because it's so frustrating for people. We need to let people live their lives. Well, DeSantis, who signed the legislation banning mask mandates across Florida and appointed the controversial mask and vaccine skeptic Dr. Joseph Ladapo as the state's Surgeon General, has clashed frequently with Biden and the government's leading infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, over their approach to the pandemic. DeSantis launched campaign merchandise mocking Fauci. Florida's death rate from COVID-19 was steadily climbing and is now the third highest in the nation, at more than 87,000 people. Earlier this month, DeSantis, who calls Florida the Freedom State, scolded students for wearing masks at a speaking engagement. Yeah, I mean, how can you be the Freedom State and scold people for wearing masks? How can you be the Freedom State and ban abortion? If you're truly free, you should be able to get an abortion. How can you be the Freedom State and prevent students from having access to LGBTQ plus materials in libraries at school, or even discussing gay issues in class? The fact that it can't even be discussed suggests that it is not a state of freedom. It is quite the opposite. It is a state of more regulation and more rules than most other states, certainly of California, where I am right now. Also, a North Carolina court has blocked a law prohibiting people with felony convictions from voting while they're not incarcerated, a move that could enfranchise about 56,000 people in the state. This is a panel of 3 Superior Court judges. They ruled 2-1 to block the law, which plaintiffs said was rooted in an effort to discriminate against black people at the turn of the 20th century in the state. The panel said the statute violated the state's constitution's guarantee of equal protection under law and free elections. So there it is. I mean, this is the reality now, isn't it? You know, that there are fundamentally these kind of extreme views that will continue, it seems, to kind of be, you know, worked into law. I just want to work these things into law. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know. And then next up, what else do we have here? Oh yes, Donald Trump has claimed to have hit a hole-in-one at his golf course in Florida while playing with the former number 1 Ernie Els. I mean, this is just a lie, isn't it? You know, I mean, the guy is basically just a liar, and he kind of often famously cheats at golf. And the fact that he cheats at golf is so famous amongst his pals that they don't even bother anymore to kind of, you know, check on him or question him. They're just like, let him cheat. And if you let him cheat, then that'll make him happy. It's just very interesting to me that this can even be allowed, you know, and yet this is Trump all over. He's a cheat and a liar. The former president released a lengthy statement about the shot, which was said to have happened on Saturday. Earlier, the federal judge said Trump likely committed felonies during his attempts to overturn his election defeat by Joe Biden. If the hole-in-one statement that followed was meant to change the conversation, it was not Trump's first gambit. You see, this is it. It's the timing, isn't it? You know, it's all about the timing. You know, fundamentally, the guy is creating a diversion. You know, he's seeing that he's increasingly likely to get indicted, and so he's like, well, what can I do to distract people right now? I'll put out a statement saying I just got a hole-in-one, when the guy obviously didn't, because he can't. He just doesn't. He's not that good at golf. It was marginally less dramatic than his move last week when a prosecutor who resigned from an investigation of Trump's business affairs said he believed the former president committed numerous felonies. Trump followed that with a 108-page lawsuit alleging a vast conspiracy to delegitimize his presidency led by Hillary Clinton. Trump said he scored his hole-in-one on a par 3/7 at the Trump International West Palm Beach. He said there was a slight wind and a rather strong wind as he hit a 5-iron. The ball, he said, bounced twice, then went clank into the hole. A video accompanied the statement. It showed Trump picking a ball out of the hole, but not the shot that he said put it in there. Referring to Trump's status as the 45th president, Els tweeted, "Great shot on Saturday, 45. Fun to watch the ball roll in for a hole-in-one." Well, it's been widely reported that Trump cheats at golf. In 2019, the golf writer Rick Riley published a book, Commander-in-Cheat: How Golf Explains Trump. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? So this is, it's kind of where it's at with this guy. If you're a cheat at heart, you'll cheat everybody. Famously, he's cheated everybody he's ever come into contact with. Anybody who's ever worked for him, he's cheated. Refuses to pay contractors. He's refused to, he just sues people. If he doesn't like them, he just sues them. That's kind of his thing. Nancy Pelosi has reportedly let slip her frustration at the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife's alleged role in the January 6th insurrection at a Democratic caucus meeting on Tuesday. Apparently, Pelosi was fired up as she answered a question from a New York Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, about any action, including possible impeachment, the House could take. Well, the Washington Post previously reported that Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, exchanged more than 24 texts with then President Donald Trump's White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on the day of the insurrection, urging him to pursue efforts to overturn Trump's election defeat. The revelation piqued the interest of the Congressional Committee investigating the deadly attack on the Capitol incited by Trump, and it sparked calls for Thomas to resign or recuse himself, after he was the only Supreme Court justice who later voted to shield White House documents that reportedly included details of his wife's alleged communications with Meadows. She said it's up to an individual justice to decide to recuse himself if his wife is participating in a coup, Pelosi told Democratic House members on Tuesday. Kagal's tweet said, noting that it was up to justices to hold themselves accountable. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Clarence Thomas is clearly compromised. And if he's voting to protect his wife, who is a far-right extremist, QAnon conspiracy theorist, down the rabbit hole kind of person, then, what are we left with? What are we left with? So yes, you can ping me on that if that's something that's of interest to you. Let's move on to something else. I have a couple of other things here that I wanted to talk about. By the way, later we're going to chat in about 20 minutes or half an hour with your pal Hal. He's on next. He joins us at about 10:45 normally. Sandy's joined us. Cynthia, Maryland. Sandy says we're left with a world in trouble. That's what we're left with. Yes. Thank you, Stacey. That's never was a truer word spoken in jest. The other thing that was, also we're going to talk about an inspirational American a little bit, women in history, and Alma Thomas is going to be our star of today, so we'll do that in around 20 minutes' time as well. So we talked about the Venezuelan troops. I wanted to get that done. Jared Kushner we mentioned as well. We've been kind of getting through these stories at a bit of a rate of knots this morning, which is good. I'm kind of happy for that. Moderna and Pfizer, I wanted to talk about that as well, so maybe we'll do that in just a little bit. Ketanji Brown Jackson we've discussed. It's nice to kind of, make sure that she's nicely covered. Nancy Pelosi we've just talked about as well. Apparently she, on the subject of Nancy Pelosi, she fears for democracy if Republicans retake Congress, she said. She said it's absolutely essential for our democracy that we win. This was an interview with the Toner Prizes for Political Journalism on Monday night. She said, I fear for our democracy if Republicans were ever to get the gavel. We can't let that happen. Democracy is on the ballot in November. Well, parties that control the White House usually receive a rebuke from voters in the first midterms after a presidential election. And with Joe Biden's poll numbers in the gutter and his administration facing strong economic headwinds and grappling with the crisis in Ukraine, Republicans are widely favored to win back the House and perhaps the Senate this year. Well, Kevin McCarthy, he said, we're going to win the majority and it's not going to be a 5-seat majority. In the Senate, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin has indicated how Republicans are looking forward to controlling committees and wielding subpoena power. The GOP, Johnson said, will be like a mosquito in a nudist colony. It's a target-rich environment. Johnson indicated a desire to investigate the federal coronavirus response and the business dealings of Hunter Biden, the president's son. Most observers expect House Republicans to scrap the committee investigating Donald Trump's attempts to overturn his election defeat and the Capitol attack that followed. Pelosi said, I don't have any intention of the Democrats losing the Congress in November. She rejected the so-called conventional wisdom about midterm elections. She said there's nothing conventional anymore because of the way people communicate with social media and how they receive their information, how they're called to action, how they're called to meetings, and the rest is quite different. So any past assumptions about elections are obsolete. We do have a plan, she said. We have a vision of the victory. We plan to get it done. We're going to own the ground. Pelosi also cast doubt on the accuracy of polling about Biden's favorability and said that redistricting, a process known widely to favor Republicans who control more state governments, would not necessarily leave Democrats at a disadvantage. Everybody said that redistricting is going to be horrible for Democrats. Pelosi said, remember that? Not so. If anything, we'll pick up seats rather than lose 10 to 15, which conventional wisdom said that we would. There's nothing conventional anymore. It certainly ain't wisdom, she said, and nobody's going to be rejecting the president. So there we go. That's kind of how Pelosi has kind of responded to this, interestingly. I actually think she might be right about this. And Sarah, maybe you want to talk about this if you want to jump in. Because, this kind of traditional aspect of after the first term, the opposing team kind of winning the Senate, or winning the House or winning the Speaker's role or whatever. I really feel like times have changed. And I do think that the Republicans have kind of shifted so far to the kind of far right, to the kind of extremes of the right wing, that it's not going to benefit them in the long run, because I don't believe that is a reflection of the American society. I actually believe that the American society generally is very progressive. And I feel like we underestimate the goodness and the kindness of people in America. And I actually think that the GOP kind of operates in its own world. It's not actually representative of the people. So they might say things, but it's not what the people are like. Would you agree?
Listen, this past presidential election, no one voted for Joe Biden. We were just voting against Trump.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remain cautiously optimistic, but honestly, I just read something that AOC said that Biden really needs to be president. Do what Trump did, but the opposite. You know what
right.
I mean?
Really,
I hope you're right. I hope we win the House and the Senate. I hope we keep that. I hope we expand our majority. Knock on wood. I pray, light some crystals, everybody. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't really, yes, I feel quote unquote safer with Biden as president, but I think I would have loved Elizabeth Warren better or Bernie Sanders. So I don't know. I think, honestly, I just really want Congress to enact term limits, and I think that would solve a lot of this. Mm-hmm. Mitch McConnell's 100, so is Nancy Pelosi.
I think it's crazy that Nancy Pelosi just announced that she was going to continue. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
but so is Dianne Feinstein. You know what I mean? I think it's,
Yeah. But what is it
like,
with those
what's the
people?
difference?
Why do you think those people refuse to kind of give it up?
because they don't
you
have
know?
anything else to do.
But can they not see the bigger picture? Can they not put country first? They not recognize that their age is actually detrimental and it's being used by the right as a kind of tool to argue, you know?
I mean, no, I don't think they really see that. I wish they did. I wish a lot of things. I don't know if God can hear me right now, but I mean, I would love, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to get passed. I'd love for critical race theory to be taught in schools. I'd love for everybody to have health care. Even if you're a Trump supporter, I want you to have health care. And I don't want you to have to pay for it. Even though we don't agree on anything, I still want you to have a health care. You know what I mean? Those are the things that I want. And I would love for a lot of that to happen. So we'll see. We will see. And if Joe Biden doesn't start doing something, then it's not going to happen.
What do you think he's missing? Because he has made a couple of really good speeches recently. The speech he made a couple of days ago in Europe was brilliant, and the speech that he made a week or so ago here in the US was kind of brilliant. What's missing with him, do you think? I mean, is it just the fact that he's kind of old and seems to be missing the point of how important these progressive aspects of but his hands are tied, surely. I mean, the social and climate bill is a very progressive bill, and he just can't get it passed.
His hands aren't tied, and I think, I'm glad you liked his speeches, but it's also people who are like my age and younger who they really need to focus on, and I don't know. I'm not that optimistic that we're gonna really pull it through.
Is it that maybe because Trump didn't have big words, because he didn't have the
people
intellect?
Feared Trump. The Republicans feared him. Nobody fears Biden. Nobody fears.
But you're not
him.
supposed to fear the president.
Exactly, I know, but that's the thing. He can't get things done because he just doesn't do it. He's still trying to go back to the old ways of
bipartisanship that is
exactly
kind of antiquated.
So I hope you're right. I hope we keep everything and we never have to see another Republican president or a Republican-led House and Senate ever again. That's my dream. But with that, the Democrats need to use their power, when they have it. You know what I mean?
Do you think that they'll maybe try and get they'll try and wrap up the January 6th committee before the midterms and then get it sent to the Justice Department? If they do, that will really help them. Because I think that they're not stupid. They know that if they were to lose in the midterms, then
that's gone.
It would get shut down. So therefore, they'll probably wrap it up imminently because they've got till November, and it's only March.
Yeah. I think if they do that, then they got to do it quick, now. Do it now.
They're getting closer, aren't they? Because they said they were always going to start with the periphery and then move in and in and in. And now they're dealing with Giuliani and Peter Navarro and
of course,
and Mark Meadows. I mean, these are the people at the very kind of nucleus of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they indict him, if they actually succeed in that, great.
Yeah.
I think that'll really help, but you know what would help more? Passing the Voting Rights Act, passing a Health Care Act, that's going to help more. Honestly, I hate Trump. I don't like him. I think he deserves to be in jail for the rest of his life, but I'm a little more concerned about the fact that we have a really bad opioid crisis going on right now, and nobody has health care, and we're in a housing crisis right now, and I'm slightly more concerned about that than whether or not Trump goes to jail. I want him gone, but that January 6th committee isn't helping us get healthcare. Sorry to break it to everybody, but that's not happening. And at the end of the day, like, what's really helping the American people? What are we really doing to, do that? Because if the Republicans take back control, nothing will get done ever, and it will be awful, and they won't help us either.
But does that not make the January 6th committee more important than healthcare? Because you're never going to get to healthcare if you don't have a democracy. And a democracy is only possible if you hold the people that conspire against the United States to account.
Absolutely. But
right. So arguably, you're not going to get voting rights unless you have the January 6th committee. You're not going to get any of these things because you're then just going to allow autocrats to run America and get away with it.
Well,
so
I mean,
for that reason, I'd put Trump being indicted as the number one priority.
I mean, if he gets indicted, that would be great. I don't know if that will necessarily help them win. I know it might help like their numbers a little bit, but I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh my God, they're the saviors. Oh my God, because what have they done to help all those things I just mentioned? You know what I mean? It's just very frustrating. And when it really comes down to it, like, everyone forgets, Trump is a media hog. All of his press helps him. He got millions of free marketing during the 2016 election.
Yeah.
He dominated the news. Like, dominated. Every single night, Trump this, Trump that. Like, he when he was president, he dominated the news.
Yeah, but he was manipulating it. He was the one that was giving them stories because of their being. And he's doing it now as distractions. Saying he got a hole in one yesterday is like such an obvious. It's so blatantly obvious to anybody with a brain.
Yeah, of course. But it's just like, it's all very like, he will always be a media hog. He will always be the story. You know what I mean? Like, if he announced tomorrow, I will let any news organization interview me about what happened on January 6th. He will sit down, no holds barred, whatever. People would be falling at his feet to do that. And that lies the problem, is that we all want to hear what he has to say, but like, right now, I don't care. I want.
Well, he doesn't have anything new to say. He's been saying the same thing now for nearly a year and a half regarding the election. And the tragedy of that is that he's perjuring himself every time, because he's convinced that he did win. And that is the tragedy of this. Did you ever think you'd be alive at a time when a president refused to accept the results of an election and kept saying that he was the winner? And the fact that they call him Mr. President, that's the protocol for former presidents. He still wears the badge. In Mar-a-Lago, he's surrounded by people that call him Mr. President, Mr. President. So he thinks he is still the president. It never occurred to him that, that he might have lost.
I think the problem is that we thought it could never happen.
Right.
I think the problem is that we got very lax.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with a lot of us, is that we don't want to have to think about it. Yeah. We don't want to have to care. We only want to focus on ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't want to focus on what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But I think right now it's being pushed in our faces so much that we have to.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why all this happened is because we thought it could never happen. Because this is America. And we're like, stuff like this doesn't happen here. And I think that's why it did.
But isn't it interesting that it did happen, and yet still people are in denial that it happened? Like, nobody was calling it a coup until very recently, and it was a coup. It was so blatantly a coup, and people couldn't say those words. In the same
I
way
heard a lot of people say the word coup.
Yeah, but the media wasn't using the word. They're now using it more. And I guess it was always a little bit like the word falsehoods that they were using for the first few years of Trump's tenure. They would never said the word lies. And only now they're starting to refer to them as lies rather than falsehoods.
And like fact-checking.
Exactly. So the media's just doing its work in retrospect. But I think with regard to what you're saying, We need the January 6th committee. I mean, I think they're doing great work, personally. I think, and I know how long these things take. And I fear that without them, there would be a huge void in this process. You know, we're hearing more and more stuff every day. I mean, the Ginny Thomas story is massive. You know, a Supreme Court Justice's wife. You know, that's massive. That shows there's no separation of powers between the executive branch and the judiciary. It's massive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree it is massive. It is a big deal, but I'll believe all of this stuff when people get held accountable. When Trump, when Clarence Thomas, when Mitch McConnell, Mark Meadows, Peter Navarro, when all those people get held accountable for what they've actually done. And like, I'm not talking about the media holding them. Well, when the media holds them all accountable, when the judicial system actually indicts these people and they face real, actual, tangible repercussions for the things that they've done, and their life is actually over, then I will have to believe all of this stuff.
What do you think of Merrick Garland? Do you have confidence in the Attorney General? Have you seen him make a speech or heard the way that he's handling himself? Do you think that he's the kind of person that's going to go after Trump and investigate this?
Yeah. I mean, Merrick Garland is famous white supremacist and the case. That's what he's known for. And I'm trying to have faith, but again, I don't know.
Because that's really the weak link here. We haven't really heard from. Oh, okay. Well, I can still see, but I think your internet suddenly got a bit weird.
I'll log off.
You definitely lost some bandwidth there. Okay. So that's Sarah. I'm Anthony. It's 10:34 Pacific. It's 1:34 Eastern. We'll talk to Hal in about 10 minutes' time and find out what's happening on his show, because that's coming up next after this show, of course. Let's look at some of your messages. Thank you very much for getting in touch, as you always do. Martha is here for the first time from Florida. Tiffany and Peaceful Spider, says Tiffany's in Newtown. Not sure where that is. Fanatical Goose is here as well. Stacy said, did you know that Rudy Giuliani was a male in New York? He was a male? Interesting. Oh, mayor. Yes, mayor. Yes, he was. He kind of presided over the mayoralty during the September the 11th terror attacks, and therefore he was considered to be the great mayor because of his response to that. But, in hindsight, we've realized that the guy's always been a bad egg, Sarah just dropped in from Arizona. Hi, Sarah. Lawrence is in. He says, what's this stream all about? Well, we talk about the news, what's happening across the country as it breaks. In some cases, we look at local papers and see what's happening in various states and just get our heads around in a very accessible way what the state of America is doing for us, if we should be proud of our country right now. Davey is here, Faint Ant, and Aria as well. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Stacey says, I don't vote, but I know how. Well, try and vote. I mean, I can't tell you who to vote for, but I can encourage voting. I think it's, it's really the only thing we have left, let's be honest. If you want to exercise your freedom, then the way you do that is by exercising your right to a free vote. Okay, let's go back to some of those big stories making the headlines in the last few minutes, and we're also going to look at our great Americans in history. The latest is where we go. Oh yes, this is a panel has now voted. The House panel investigating the Capitol attack has voted to recommend the criminal prosecution of two of Donald Trump's former White House aides, Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino, for defying subpoenas in a bid to undermine the January 6 inquiry. The Select Committee unanimously approved the contempt of Congress report it had been examining. The citations now head for a vote before the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, which is expected to approve resolutions for referrals to the Justice Department. The Congressman Benny Thompson, the chair of the Select Committee, said at the vote that the panel was seeking the criminal prosecution for Navarro and Scavino to punish their non-cooperation over claims of executive privilege it did not recognize. So there we go. That's the very latest on that story. Okay, let's jump into our story about great inspirational Americans. Today we're talking about Columbus, Georgia. We're talking about Alma Thomas, who was born in Columbus, in Georgia, on the 22nd of September 1891. Alma Thomas was an artist known for circular paintings with lots of colours. And during the 1960s, Alma emerged as an exuberant colorist, abstracting shapes and patterns from the trees and flowers around her. A new palette and technique considerably lighter and looser than that of her early representational works and dark abstractions reflected her long study of her theory and watercolor medium. Well, she was the eldest of 4 daughters. Her father worked in a church and her mother was a seamstress and homemaker. Thomas's family was well respected in Columbus, and she and her sisters grew up in comfortable surroundings. The family lived in a large Victorian house high on a hill overlooking the town, where Thomas spent her childhood observing the beauty and colour of nature. In 1907, when Thomas was 15 years old, her father moved the family to Washington, D.C. She enrolled in Howard University and in 1924 became the first graduate of its newly formed department. Thomas's teacher and mentor, James Herring, granted her use of his private art library, from which she gained a thorough background in art history. A decade later, from which she gained earned a Master of Arts degree in Education from Columbia University. Well, during the 1950s, Thomas attended art classes at American University in Washington. She studied painting under Joe Summerford, Robert Gates, and Jacob Kanan, and developed an interest in color and abstract art. Throughout her teaching career, she painted and exhibited academic still lifes and realistic paintings in group shows of African American artists. And although her paintings were competent, they were never singled out for individual recognition. As a black woman artist, Thomas encountered many barriers. She did not, however, turn to racial or feminist issues for her art, believing rather that the creative spirit is independent of race and gender. In Washington, D.C., where she lived and worked after 1921, she became identified as Morris Louis. Gene Davis and other color-filled painters active since 1950s. Like them, she explored the power of color and form in luminous, contemplative paintings. She began to paint seriously in 1960 when she retired from her 38 career as an art teacher in the public schools of Washington, D.C., and in the years that followed, she would become regarded as a major painter in the Washington Colorfield School. Thomas was in her 8th decade of life when she produced her most important works. Earliest to win acclaim was her series of earth paintings, pure color abstractions of concentric circles that often suggest target paintings and stripes. Done in the 1960s, these works bear references to rows and borders of flowers inspired by Washington's famed azaleas and cherry blossoms. Well, the titles of her paintings often reflect this influence. In these canvases, brilliant shades of green, pale and deep blue, violet, deep red, light red, orange and yellow are offset by white areas of untouched raw canvas suggesting jewel-like Byzantine mosaics. Alma Thomas never married and lived in the same house that her father bought in downtown Washington in 1907. The final years of her life brought awards and recognition. In 1972, she was honored with 1 Women art exhibitions at the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Kororkin Gallery of Art. The same year, one of her paintings was selected for the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Well, before her death in 1978, Thomas had achieved national recognition as a major woman artist devoted to abstract painting. So there we go. That's our woman of colour, but also woman in history, as we celebrate inspirational women. And this celebration is of Alma Thomas. So there we go. Born in 1891. Amazing. She was honored in 1972. So we died in 1978. So there we go. And it's just nice to kind of recognize people that we might not know, might not think about, might not be aware of, who have kind of contributed to American society in a way that is influencing us as people living in and amongst this in this world. And I don't get to go to art galleries very often, but when I do, I mean, I'm going to look out for her stuff now that I know that she exists, I suppose. Couple of things that have just dropped in. New York court urged to uphold an order for Donald Trump to face questioning. This is the Attorney General of New York is asking an appeals court to uphold a lower court ruling requiring Trump to answer questions under oath after a civil investigation uncovered evidence that he may have misstated the value of assets like golf courses and skyscrapers on financial statements for more than a decade. So that's the latest. That's Letitia James's office, of course. It said it had every right to question him. He's appealing against the lower court ruling as it seeks to determine whether the misrepresented values shown to lenders, taxing authorities and other business interests constituted fraud, and if so, who committed that fraud. So there we go. That's the latest on Donald Trump. We kind of wrap him up nicely, seeing as we've been talking about him throughout the show. Ordinary Cougar just dropped in from California. Joshua is here from America. Not sure where that is. Nutcracker is welcome as well. Tiffany, Sarah, Martha, Peaceful Spider, Fanatical Goose and Davey and Faintan, Lawrence and Aria, Davey, Dennis, Brainy Lima, Modern Carp, Mellow Leopard, Sandy, Stacy, Cynthia, Maryland, Lisa, Glossy Barracuda, Mint Oyster, Encouraging Links and Wanda. Thank you all for joining us here on Backchannel on this Tuesday morning. Okay, let's jump into meet our friend, your friend, my friend, the guy who's on next and who's going to spend the next couple of hours with you. We're going to talk to your pal, my pal, Hal, in just a moment. When he drops in, he'll kind of slide in, maybe this side or this side. Whichever side I pick to kind of welcome Hal in is always the wrong side, so I'm just going to have to kind of keep working on that. But we'll find out what's happening in his show. And just a reminder that, we talk on this show about, the news, current affairs, current issues, things that are kind of making the headlines. Normally the biggest stories, but most importantly, the most important stories across the day. Things that I think are of great value. The Los Angeles Times this morning kind of kicked us off. We look at a few of the local papers, and if ever you have a local paper or a story that you want to talk about, that's maybe in a newspaper, like Stacey has recommended that we review the San Antonio Express News, which we tried to do, then you're welcome to message us. And you can, of course, leave a review in the usual way at backchannel.tv, as well as suggestions for the show as well. And there's loads of reviews for Backchannel now on Amazon that you can look at. And if you have an Echo show, then that's the best way to watch and engage with Backchannel, because, of course, that takes advantage of our free speech. So you can wake up your device, say the word say, and then your message. And then that comes straight through to any one of the hosts that is sitting here having a chat with you throughout the day. 12 hours of every single day. You'll get live hosts here on Backchannel. It is the only place where you can listen to and chat with live hosts on your device, namely the Echo Show. I have a little Echo Show. It's just I think it might be the second generation one. I think it might be called Echo Show 5. I'm not sure. But anyway, I have one of those. So that's kind of, I say just turn on Backchannel or what's the phrase I say? Activate Backchannel? Open Backchannel. That's what it is. Open Backchannel. And that gives me access to all of the facilities here. And there's lots of things you can do with Backchannel. So feel free to kind of mess around with it and try and find it. Okay. Is Hal available? Do you want to jump in, Hal, if you're ready, willing and able? I mean, it is Tuesday, and you do normally do Tuesdays, unless I'm strangely mistaken. Not here yet. Okay, well, as soon as he is, then welcome him in. But thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Hal, I've said this before, but Hal I often thought was in New York. For some reason, I don't know. They don't really tell us where the other hosts are. And it turns out he's just like a mile away from me here. So one day we'll probably end up doing the show together in the same room, spending time with each other. Ah, there he is. I was just talking about you. Isn't that funny?
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. My ears were burning. I knew something was afoot.
There's always something afoot when you're, on a Tuesday or a Thursday. I actively look forward to this moment in the show where I can share
Same
the
here.
space. Do you?
It's always a pleasure talking to you. I feel like you are a calming influence. I'm like sometimes I come in guns blazing into my show, but talking to you, I'm able to just ease in and ramp up. I just enjoy the discourse. Always a pleasure, Anthony.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate that. Yes, I'm not one to be overly reactive. Less is more, I think. I like to save it for a special occasion.
You know what? I should take a page out of your book. I'm energetic, but I pick and choose my spots, though. Sometimes I know when to tone it down, but every once in a while, my wife says, "All right, can you be serious for a moment?" So.
It's hard. I mean, the thing, people don't understand this about comedy, do they? That, comedians are very serious people fundamentally underneath, and that in order to get to good comedy, you have to really respect the seriousness of it. And if you've studied it, which I know you have, you kind of, when you get into the weeds of it, there's not anything really funny about it. The funny is like the last thing that happens in the chain.
It's true. I definitely laugh, but I laugh a little less, especially when I'm watching comedies. I'm like, if I like something, I'll be like, I appreciate that. It's every once in a while I'll watch something where I lose it. But What, Anthony? May I ask you, what's something you've watched either recently or a classic that gets you going, laughing?
I watched The Wedding Singer a couple of nights ago, which I went back to, haven't seen in a while, and I found myself laughing out loud quite a lot. Normally with the, is it the brother, the guy with this amazing hair?
Adam Sandler?
No, not Adam Sandler.
Oh.
The older guy who's like the uncle or something,
Oh, you know what?
He's got one of those, he's just got like a really funny face. And he's like the kind of light relief in the show. But I also love like seeing the old people that are presented in that movie, like as being the kind of light comedy relief. Anyway, I found myself laughing a lot. I'd really forgotten kind of why that film is so very funny. So
I mean, Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore at the height of their powers.
Right. It's true. And there was a period, wasn't there, like something about Mary? There was like a period of those movies that came out around that time, and they were just so well written. And
yes.
I think they've really lasted the test of time. So, you go back and you look at them now, and they just really hold their own still. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and there's, at the core of them, they have heart.
Yeah.
And they have accessible emotions, and you can relate to them. So I appreciate where you're coming from there.
It's nice to see a classic. I do sometimes struggle because I want to watch Coda, of course, which won Best Film. Did you agree with that as a win? Did you think that Coda should have won?
There are two films that I haven't seen. I've seen 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 9, however many that were nominated. The two I haven't seen, Coda and Belfast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Belfast was the Kenneth Branagh movie, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I want to see both, and I will eventually. But a couple of films that I loved that I would have been happy with winning were, I thought Power of the Dog was very good. I would have been fine with that winning. I loved the 3-hour Japanese film, Drive My Car. I thought that was lovely and sad and beautiful.
I went to the theatre last week to see a show called Lehman Brothers that's on at the Armand.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's
no,
3
I
hours.
haven't. But
it's on till the.
I've heard.
It's got another kind of 2 weeks to run, but it's 3 1 hours. The show is 3 1 hours, and it starts at 8 p.m. So it's like it's a long night. So I went along, but I only watched the first half, and then I went home. So I've got 2 more parts to go. And I thought the show had closed, but apparently it's still open. So now I'm considering going back to the theatre to watch one more part, and then I'll have to go back again. It's not very cost effective to do it this way. But I can't really see myself sitting through. I can't really sit through like a 3.5 hour epic in one night.
Sure.
Without wanting to go and have some snacks.
Oh, I had a devil of an experience watching Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. I saw it in the theater.
Yes,
I saw it in a theater, not in on Netflix. And I was at the Egyptian in Hollywood, where the seats, it was the worst. Wrong place, wrong time. The theater was warm. I was sitting too close to the screen, and the seats were uncomfortable. So I was like this, and it was just for 3.5 hours, and it really colored the experience. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So you're saying Lehman Brothers worth seeing?
One of the best things I've ever seen.
But you couldn't stick around.
Nah.
I hear you. That's a commitment. Especially, were there two intermissions then?
Two intermissions.
First and second? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm tempted to go back. And the other thing is, it's a British show. It's a national theatre production, and it stars two actors that I've kind of know. One of them, Simon Russell Beale's one of in England's most kind of celebrated actors right now, and is in everything. And then Adam Godley, who directed me in something when I was like 10 years old. So, I mean, I don't know him, but I met him then, obviously, and I remember him very well from my childhood, and he's in it as well. And he's in a whole bunch of movies, including like Harry Potter and stuff. And so it was wonderful. It was one of the best things I've ever seen on stage. Couldn't sit through the second half. I was just starting to kind of tire. I was like, like neck ache, like holding still. You know, at least if you watch a film at home, you can like pause it and relocate. But I'm just so out of practice from going to the theatre that I needed to press pause, which I did, and then drove home.
Yeah. No, I would maybe go in the lobby and stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, even drive my car, I thought it was stunning, but I watched it in 2 sittings.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. It took me. I wanted to watch a film recently, and I tell you what it was. It was that new. It's on HBO, I think. It's that new thing that Matt Damon is in. That's the period piece with Ben Affleck.
Oh, The Last Duel.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah,
Took me 4 or 5 sittings to get through that. You know, that was really that was a lot of work for me. You know. Anyway, it's great to see you. I'm sure that you've got some shenanigans coming up in your show today. Would that be correct?
Hijinks, shenanigans, and we're going to talk. Yesterday, we were really dominated by Oscar talk. Today, we're going to widen our scope a little bit.
Nice. Okay. Well, maybe some Grammys or something. You know.
You never know. You never know.
Okay, Hal. Thank you. Appreciate you. Enjoy your show, as I'm sure everybody else will. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's 12 o'clock Eastern. Join me then. Next is Hal. Bye.